Hello there. Today, I'm going to be building Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber entirely from cardboard and showing you guys how you could build the exact same thing. If you've been following my channel, then you'll know that I've done several highly accurate lightsaber builds as a part of my Extendable Blade series, which use many of the same original parts as the screen-used lightsabers in the original trilogy. But those weren't really DIY videos because most people don't have access to the same kind of equipment and materials that I was using for those builds. So I thought, what about a saber build that anyone can do, regardless of skill level, that still retains screen-accurate dimensions and reads as an authentic prop? So that's what I put together today, and I feel confident when I say that anyone who follows the steps in this video can put together the same highly accurate replica of the Anakin Skywalker lightsaber. Now I'm just going to create the hilt for today, because once we get into blades and electronics, then we're moving into the realm of specialized skill sets and materials that not everybody has. Even if you already own a high-end replica of this saber, this can be a really fun build to try your hand at if you want to create a different variation of the saber like I did, or even if you just want to create a lighter belt hanger version of the saber that you can wear to conventions and not worry about it getting damaged. It's also not that difficult. This project only took me one day to put together. The materials that you're going to need for this project are as follows. Number 1, a hot glue gun. Number 2, cereal box cardboard. Number 3, aluminum tape. Number 4, miscellaneous screws. Number 5, scissors. And that's it! Now, there are other optional materials that you can use to make the saber look even more accurate, and I'll highlight those throughout the build. But if we're really splitting hairs, you can build this entire project with only those 5 things. Now, I've already put together a replica of Anakin's lightsaber as seen in Empire Strikes Back, which is my personal favorite version of the prop. So today, I thought I would put together the version seen in A New Hope, just to change it up a little bit. The first thing you'll want to do for this build is to cut out around 50 cardboard circles with a diameter of 1 3/8 inches. I recommend doing this from thicker corrugated cardboard as you won't have to cut out nearly as many. Once they're all cut out, you can glue them all together stacked on top of one another like pancakes. This is going to create a rigid form for us to wrap the thinner cardboard around that'll ensure that it stays perfectly cylindrical. The next thing that I did, you guys will not need to do this, is to wrap my original Graflex in masking tape. Once all the tape is removed, I'm able to use that to pull a 2-dimensional print of where all the cuts that I need to make are. Once I cut them all out, I was left with a 2D cardboard form that can be wrapped around the stacked cylinder that we made earlier. The form measures 11 inches at its highest point and 4.75 inches wide. I'm planning to release a template to go along with this build that will have all of these dimensions included to make things easier for you guys. The link to that should hopefully be added to the description in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that. Once that's all cut out, you can cover the top 2 inches of the inside in aluminum tape. We're doing that now because a bit of the inside is going to be visible after we roll it into a cylinder, and it's much easier to apply the tape before rolling than it is after. Once that's done, you can finally begin to wrap the cardboard cylinder we made with the saber's exterior that we just cut out. I went ahead and glued the cylinder to the inside of the form so that it would stay perfectly rigid, but that's optional. Once it's all wrapped and glued, if you choose to do that, we can start covering the exterior in aluminum tape. Try to align the tape seams as closely as possible and not to wrinkle the tape too much because we're trying to simulate a very smooth finish. One thing you can do at this stage is to fold the 2 tabs of the H bracket upwards, and now we have the opening to add the bunny ears. To make the bunny ears, I did the same thing. I pulled a print from my actual Graflex bunny ears and transferred it onto cardboard. The finished shape that you'll want to cut out is basically a cross with one end rounded and 2 shark fin flanges, which make up one half of the ring, or one ear, if you will. For the other half, or ear, you're going to make the exact same shape but with a shorter tail. The exact dimensions for all these parts will be in the template. Once you fold the shark fin flanges down on both and connect them together, you've got your dimensionally accurate bunny ears. Those can be screwed into the H bracket tabs on top of the saber using one of the miscellaneous screws that I said we'd need earlier. To create the bulb assembly that sits right inside the head, I made a tapered cylinder that I wrapped in gaffer's tape. Like I said before, that's optional. You can color it in with a Sharpie if you want. I just preferred the matte texture of gaffer's tape. For the brass pins that are visible through the circular cutouts, I used little brass screws. Dimensions don't really matter for this part, just make sure that the 2 brass pins are aligned with the circles that you cut out. You're going to hold this part in place with another one of the miscellaneous screws, preferably a flathead that's about 1/8 of an inch if you have one. Next, we'll move on to the red button assembly. Now, you can build the button from scratch, but if you want to add that extra little bit of realism to it, you can get replicas of the red button on the Roman Props website for around $24. It is definitely a precision part that reads super well if you have one of the actual components there, but I will show you guys that you don't need to buy this part. You can make it if you're on a budget.
I started by cutting out a rectangle 2 3/16 of an inch long, covering it in aluminum tape and wrapping it into a cylinder. Incidentally, it fit perfectly onto my pinky finger and got me thinking that I could pass it off as a signet ring pretty easily, but I digress. I made a very small cardboard cone that got taped and glued to the inside of the cylinder. You can eyeball the shape of that one. And for the button itself, I made a very small cylinder with a circular stopper cut down to the correct length. We are in Eyeball City right now. These parts are so small that you've got to just keep making micro adjustments until they sit right. To color the button, you've got a few choices. You can color it with a marker or colored tape pretty easily. I ended up just painting it dark red to make sure that I could really get the color as close to the original as possible. But again, optional. I do not think it's necessary to go out and buy paints just for this project. You can definitely get it done with what you have. It's a similar story with the glass eye. I recommend picking up a replica part from Roman Props that will lend a lot of authenticity to your prop. Alternatively, if you're doing the version from Empire Strikes Back, then you can just build a second red button where the glass eye would be located. If you're making the A New Hope version, you can cut out a beer tab piece to sit underneath the red button for extra authenticity as well. To make the Graflex clamp, I started with a cardboard rectangle, cut out 4 square holes and 1 long oval hole, and then covered the piece in aluminum tape. I also scored some very faint lines into the tape to mimic the grooves on the real clamp, which is another step you can take if you so choose. I made the clamp bars by cutting out 2 of these plus-shaped pieces with holes in the middle, covering them in aluminum tape, and then folding the 4 tabs down to create boxes. At this point, the clamp piece can be wrapped around the body of your saber to create the curve and folded in 4 places to create a profile that looks something like this. Then you can slot the clamp bars that you made into the empty spaces in the clamp and hold the whole thing in place with another miscellaneous screw. See, I told you guys we'd be needing miscellaneous screws. Don't skimp on those. The last piece of this part is the clamp lever, which you can make by cutting out a piece of this shape. How would you describe this shape? Bell curve? I don't know. Whatever it is, cover it in tape and then fold the 2 sides down. Boom, clamp lever. Before gluing the clamp in place, I added a few pieces of electrical tape to parts of my saber that would be visible through the clamp holes to give the illusion of depth, and then I glued the clamp down on top of them. At this point in the build, you've essentially created a replica of the unmodified Graflex camera flash stand, so if you're just making a replica of a random vintage camera part, you can stop here. But if you're doing the lightsaber, we now have to start in on the modified pieces. First up is the D-ring. I made this by cutting out a circle from cardboard, covering it in aluminum tape, and then riveting in an actual D-ring assembly that you can get in a pack of 2 for super cheap at Home Depot. This whole piece is optional though. If you want to display the saber standing up, then I don't recommend adding this piece. You can also use screws instead of rivets if that's all you have. But anyway, next up is the clamp card. Now, you have a lot of options for this, because they change it every movie. In A New Hope, they use an Exactra calculator bubble strip, so that's what I'll be using in mine. You can create this piece by cutting out a rectangle from rigid plastic, and then adding 7 prominent beads of hot glue. You honestly end up with a pretty passable semi-translucent piece. You can also just buy a clamp card. You can get these for like under $5. Like I said, you have a lot of options. Finally, we are going to make arguably the most iconic part of the Anakin lightsaber, the T-track grips. To make these, you'll need to cut out 12 skinny rectangles and 6 wider ones. The wider rectangles can be folded in 3 places to create a ridge and to make them the same width as the skinny ones. Once you've folded all the wide rectangles into ridged skinny ones, you can stack 2 skinnies under each wide to make 1 T-track. I also made angled cuts along each one to create the bevels on the New Hope style grips, but that's not necessary if you're making the Empire versions. If you are doing those, you'll have to cut notches into each one and add a screw or rivet to hold them in place. Also, the Empire Saber has 6 grips, like I just instructed you to make, but the New Hope version has an extra 7th grip, so make sure to make 1 extra if that's the style you're making. I chose to cover each grip in electrical tape to give it that rubbery finish. This is totally optional. You can paint them, you can color them with Sharpie, dealer's choice. Once that's done, go ahead and slap those on the saber because we are finished. Great job to anyone following along at home. I'm just assuming that you followed all of my instructions and therefore your saber came out perfectly.
And there you have it, folks, Anakin's lightsaber hilt. I think this came out really well for a one-day build, and definitely for a build that I didn't buy any materials for. And I think it even looks pretty good when it's put right up against an original, which is definitely rare for a cardboard prop. I hope you guys found this build interesting. If there's a lot of demand for it, I would consider doing another cardboard saber replica, maybe one of the thin necks, just because I have access to all of the dimensions for those too. But yeah, I'm open to suggestions. If any of you guys give this build a try, I would love to hear about it. And yeah, do send me recommendations for what to build next. Otherwise, I'm gonna drop a ton of film videos and you guys can't complain, okay? Until then, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you in hell.